There are lots of good reasons to use services instead of creating your own functions, like just a straight up function, and we covered those in a previous video. One of the benefits was the idea that you can override a service. You can take a service and replace it with your own class that does its own things and not have to do any funky trying to figure out what variables are being passed around and grab them after some other service has done something with them. Instead, we can replace the service, which is just this clean break, and do what we need to in that new service class. So how do we do that? That's what this next section is about. The basic idea is that we're going to create a class that is similar to an existing service. It needs to have a similar signature so that other parts of the code base that use that service can still reliably use the methods in that service, even though something else might be going on under the hood. So we first need that class, and then we need to create a service provider file, which will allow us to do an alter on that list of services. We can also register new services that way, but typically we'll want to do that in a services.yml file. So these are the two steps that we need to take. We need to create a new class that's similar to an existing service but does something a little bit different. And then we need to alter this service container to use our new class. So let's go ahead and get started with that. I'm going to jump to our source folder inside of our blind date folder. This is the module that we've been working on. And what I'm going to do is copy this blind dating service.php. I'm just going to duplicate it, and I'm going to append this with a 2 so it has a different name. And then inside of this, I'm going to open it up. We're going to change this to blind dating service 2, and we're going to change this text here. By changing this text, we'll know whether we're using our overridden service or the original service. Okay, so now it says overriding in Drupal is fun. Our new service class needs to exist inside of our source folder because it's a class, and any classes need to be in the source folder to be auto-loaded, to be discovered that way. Now, everything that we just did can be found in our resource pack in step 24. You can just copy the blind dating service 2.php and put it inside of your source folder, and you'll have something very similar to what we have right now. Okay, so this was the first step. Nothing is going to happen though, because this is just a class that's sitting there. Nothing's using it, right? So now we need to override our existing service. So I'm going to jump to the resource pack directory. And what we need to do is create a blind date service provider.php file. We have one pre-made here. We'll use that. This is step 25. I'm going to copy it and paste it in our source folder. We'll rename it blind date service provider. Now, the convention here is specific. It needs to be a camel-cased version of the module, which in our case is a capital B, and then everything else is lowercase. You see with these other classes, we've been calling it blind and then a capital D8, simply because it makes a little bit more sense for readability. But the name of our actual module is blind D8 in underscores, and a camel-cased version of that is just going to be a capital B, everything else underscore. And so this is the first part of the name, and then the second part is serviceprovider.php. And we can open it up to see what this looks like. So the class in here needs to extend the service provider base. So we have extend service provider base. And we can find examples of this by searching the code base for this. I'm going to go ahead and do a search across our entire code base and click find. At this point, there's only one inside of core, the language service provider. And we can look at this to get a sense of what's going on. You can see that there's a register method, which is where services get registered. Again, this can be done most of the time through our YAML file, but in certain cases, if you're dynamically generating a set of services, you might need to do so inside of this file so you can use logic for it. And then if we scroll down, you see that there's an alter here. An alter is really the one that we want to work with. So if we look at blind date service provider, I'm going to go ahead and close out this search. You can see that we have public function alter, and then it gets past container builder, and that's container. We can learn more about what's available in this container by simply setting a breakpoint here or using a var dump to see what's inside of it. But within here, what we can do is get a definition for a particular service. So in this case, what we're doing is overriding the service that we created earlier through the blind date module, and it's called blinddate.blinddatingservice. If we look at our services YAML file, I'm going to jump back to our code base and jump up to our base directory inside of our module. and I'll open up blinddate.services.yml, you see our service here, blinddate.blinddatingservice. And if we go back to our blind date service provider file, you'll see that we're using the same name here. So we can grab the definition here and we're going to save it as this definition variable. And then this is actually an object, and we can use the setClass method on it in order to change the class of this particular service. So if we change this to remove the to, this would be the way it is right now. But with the to, we get to use our new service. Okay, so this affects our dependency injection container, so we're going to need to rebuild it from scratch. So I'm going to go to the browser, go to Configuration, Performance, and clear all caches. And let's go to our blind date page. And you can see here in our text that would have been provided by the get tagline method in our service, it's now saying overriding in Drupal is fun. So we've now successfully overridden our service. Cool.